Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch, and happy Friday to you guys. And as always, we're bringing some more amazing guests with you guys. But before we get started, do me a favor, head on over to that YouTube channel, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And this also helps support the channel. Now, before we get started, this is for educational purposes only, and there may be language. So please, if you have kids around, just be very mindful of that. And now, without further ado, my next guest, I met him. This guy, we have a lot in common. He is a grief specialist, and yes, he is another guy out here doing amazing things in the world, Mr. Bill Fennell. Now, I'm going to bring him up here, and if you guys have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer those as we go along. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring up my guests. Bill, how you doing today, brother?
Hey, I'm awesome, man. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, man. Thank you for being on the show. Now, before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people where you're from.
Okay, so my name is Bill Fennell, and I am currently in Michigan City, Indiana, because I'm a traveling kind of guy. I actually have a 26-foot shuttle bus that I converted to a camper, and I'm going to be back on the road again, hopefully shortly. But my hometown, my base is in Michigan City, Indiana. That's on the shores of Lake Michigan, real close to Chicago.
Nice. Now we talked before and had an amazing conversation, man. You are a grief specialist, and you volunteer your work. You're doing good things in your community, and still building up that momentum, man. And so first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that you do, and for to see what you do in the future, man. So many amazing things. But you also have a story about how you got into this work, right?
Yeah. So sadly, you and I are both in the lost child club. My daughter, Caitlin, died. It's going to be 7 years this month. On the 17th of this month, it's going to be 7 years. So she had fought leukemia twice, and lost that battle to a simple yeast infection when she was compromised from the chemo. And over the course of a week, it went into sepsis, and her body shut down, and we lost her. And then that obviously changed the projection of where I was going with life. It turned into a dark period for a while. I started plotting my own demise, and the professionals will tell you it's one thing to, I'm thinking about it, but when you got a plan, that's the point where you start getting this professional help. So I talked to a professional. They talked me off the ledge. She was a very straightforward person and said, I can empathize with you, sir, but I can't wrap my head around what you've gone through. I really want you to go find either a therapist who's gone through it or parent group where you can meet other parents. And started that process, went to the Compassionate Friends. And for those maybe who are new to this journey, the Compassionate Friends is strictly other parents who've lost a child. We gather usually once a month. There's chapters all over the world. You go to their website, put in your zip code. It is very helpful if somebody is a new to the loss kind of person. I mean, if you're down the stream a bit, you can still go to it, but it's very helpful because you can sit with other parents who have gone through this insanity. The rest of the world doesn't get us. I mean, your head just gets transformed. You have these questions that you don't even want to be around other people who have kids sometimes because of the feelings you have. It's just a hot mess thing, and you basically, they hold your hand, they walk you through it, they answer questions. You tell your story, they tell your story. And we share things. We share about our child, good things, bad things, funny things. And it helps get us through a month. Then you come back the next month and maybe you meet somebody new that's further in the process or somebody fresh in the process. Now you can be that person helping the next one in navigating the insanity. So did that. Then I went to, I got a phone call from a friend. She ran an education center. They put on grief classes, and she knew another dad who lost a child and wanted me to connect with them, see if we could lean on each other, help each other. So I went to this center, community center, going to meet the guy. He bailed. I sat through the grief class, and on the table was this purple book. It's called The Grief Recovery Method. And I said, hey, I've seen that on Amazon. I kind of was thinking about getting that. And what do you think of it? She said, oh, man, that's what we use to teach this class. Okay. And she gave me a copy. So I took it with me, put it in my storage with me. 3 months later, my new wife and I changed our trajectory a bit. We purchased a shuttle bus, 26-foot shuttle bus, converted it to a camper, and we spent 10 months traveling the South and Southwest. So we got in the desert of Arizona, and I feel like it's a Moses kind of story. I'm in the desert where I don't have anything pressing right now, and I read this book, and it's transforming your grief. I mean, it just blew me away, the things that they gave you as far as tools for grief. I get to the end, they got a website, and they talk about you can become a certified grief specialist. So got on the phone, got on the website. First class I could physically get to, I went over so I went from, at the time in Arizona, all the way across the country and got myself into New Jersey to get into the class, took that. And then I went back to that same education center and tried to get into a program where I could teach grief there. And they also had an opportunity for me to help with their food rescue program. So it's they're tied with a homeless shelter. And 2 days a week, I drive this big box truck and I go to Walmart and another regional grocery store called Meijer. And then we got also Aldi's, and all their expiring stuff, they donate to us. So I gather that up and we take it back to the location and we divvy it up between a couple of soup kitchens in the shelter. So that's how I got into working with the homeless. And during the remaining part of the week, I'm at the day shelter and I'm working with homeless people on a daily basis, trying to help them become self-sufficient. And then I'm also interjecting grief work with them, trying to get them to talk about and accept that it's time to deal with your grief. I'm going to be honest here. Everybody avoids dealing with their grief. I mean, it's drilled in our head to not deal with it. That's the honest truth of it. The first thing we learn is don't cry, be strong. Time will heal everything. Grieve alone, all kinds of bad things society teaches us about grief. Yeah. And I have to try to get that undone first before I can get him to start saying, okay, yeah, I need to face my grief. So a lot of the people at the shelter they're alcoholics, they're drug users, they have mental health issues, but I would say 80% of them have traumatic grief experiences that they have never dealt with. And some of them don't realize that it's tied to what's going on today. Some of them do, but they choose to ignore it. That's why they're there, because they've been hitting the bottle or been using drugs, and that's put them in the homeless shelter. So that is what I do, kind of in a nutshell. And then I have a private practice of grief where I do either one-on-one grief or group, and it's all on Zoom. So I mentioned the bus, and I mentioned I'm going to get back to traveling. Well, the cool thing about living in this age, you can use Zoom and you can do this anywhere as long as you got an internet connection. So my goal is to get back on my bus, travel to cool places. While I was traveling before, I took a little bottle about this big that had some of my daughter's ashes. So I left a little of my daughter in a lot of places like New Orleans, Grand Canyon, Joshua Tree National Park, and a bunch of beautiful places all along there. So it was kind of a cathartic thing. Back at the funeral or the viewing, one of her friends, one of my friends, somebody said, man, you have to live life for her. And that stuck in my head. So much. Let's see if I can get this.
Oh, yeah. On your arm there?
Right. Live life for her. That's her handwriting. And her ashes in there. Now, let's see. I'm terrible with this camera. Right here is the semicolon.
Okay.
Now, are you familiar with the semicolon as a tattoo?
I am. We talked about that before.
Okay, you are. I don't know if your audience is, but that's for people who either are honoring somebody who attempted suicide or successfully committed it, or somebody who themselves has thought about it, attempted it. Semicolon, when you read, is a pause. If it's a period, you ended the story. So this is a reminder to just pause. Otherwise, it's an end. So you use that as a reminder. Think about it. You can go on. You can work through it. So tattoos, traveling, all that. Yeah. So I wish I could give credit to the person that told me, man, you got to live for her, but it's lost in the fog of those early days of losing a child. But I'm doing it.
Yeah, man. Well, that's totally understandable, because this is a club that no one wants to be a part of. And it's such a difficult reality, right? Because as parents, and as men, we're isn't bred in us that we're supposed to be the protectors, the providers, and things like that. So, and we always, when we look at our children, we always say, hey, our children are supposed to outlive us, right?
Absolutely.
And when we tell ourselves that, which I realized, a little bit later down the road, that I had to be honest with myself. No one ever promised me that.
Right.
No one ever said that this is the way that it's supposed to be. And it's a harsh reality to accept. And as a male, now before we get into the grieving process, because I really want to know how your grieving process was, and just to talk about it a little bit, because I think there's a lot of similarities when it comes down to men and grief that people really don't catch on to, right? I mean, they see us go through it, but it's the perception versus reality. Oftentimes when we go through it, it looks crazy. It looks downright nasty and chaotic.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I want to, if you don't mind, I want to go back a little bit, right? Who was Bill before this happened? What, and who was Caitlin, right? Before she was done. I didn't say her name the right way, right?
You got it, Caitlin. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I always have to be careful. Huh?
Okay. We'll start with her, Caitlin. She was my rock star. She was a student taking advanced college classes in high school. Is that right? Advanced college class. Yeah, that's right. I said it right. 4 sports: basketball, volleyball, softball, squeezed in cheerleading. Anything outside that she could do to add for academic or community, she jumped into it. I mean, I was not an athlete. I was not a stellar student. She did all this in spite of her parents. So we were divorced when she was 8. So I think some of this was to her coping with her grief, of the divorce and the things and change. But she was my rock star. So she was 18, 6 weeks into her freshman year of college in Indiana when she got the diagnosis the first time. So she went to the ER because she was having chest pain. Now, what you have to understand is my little athlete she was one of these focused, play through anything kind of athletes. She went to a small school that graduated 70 kids a year. So when the basketball season ended, 2 days later, you started training for softball. So the last basketball game, she cracked her heel and she was in a boot. So 2 weeks, 3 weeks into softball training, I get a call from a parent who's concerned. Hey, your daughter's out there in that boot sliding and running and trying to play in that. So we had to kind of have a conversation with the coach and my daughter. Look, short term, long term, being injured, we got to be more careful. So for her to go to the hospital, it had been bad. So her chest was hurting. She went in. I guess it was a long wait because by the time she saw them, the pain had kind of gone away. So they gave her a little bit of pain medicine, sent her back to school and her dorm room. So she's at Indiana University where they have a good medical school. And she also happened to have 3 roommates who had known her since first grade. So 2 hours later, she's stumbling and slurring. So they're like, oh, no, you're going back. So they took her back, and that started 2 weeks of testing there at their hospital. They couldn't find anything, couldn't figure anything out. All right, okay, we're going to send you an hour up to Indy, in Indianapolis, to the Children's Hospital there for some testing. Tested another week or so, couldn't find anything. And then they said, all right, we're going to do a bone marrow test. And immediately we're like, doesn't that indicate cancer? He said, yes, but if it was cancer, we should have seen it in all the blood work so far. And it's not making any sense. So sure enough, did the biopsy, and it was leukemia. It had not processed out of the bone marrow, so it was fully showing up the way it should in blood work. Now, just 2 weeks, 3 weeks before going to school, to college, she was feeling off and had seen the doctor, and they thought it was mono. So it's possible even then that there were symptoms, but couldn't put the pieces together. So that started, I think it was 2.5 years of treatment. She had 5 years cancer-free, was doing well, back in college, and February of 2017, like late February, she went back for her quarterly blood work, and blood work said it was back. So immediately starts treatment. 3 weeks later, she gets an infection. So anybody who's gone through chemo treatment, they're familiar with this. You get an infection, you go in, you get an antibiotics, you're probably staying ICU for a bit, 3-4 days, whatever, till the antibiotics wipe out whatever it is, because your immune system is just super suppressed. Wasn't working. They determined it was a yeast infection, and she couldn't fight it. And so she was in like on a Saturday, Sunday, and it just progressively got worse. Wednesday that week, Tuesday was the last day I spoke to her. Wednesday, they put a tube down her throat before I got back to the hospital. So I never got those last words exchanged with her. And then Friday morning, I went to the Ronald McDonald room. I'm thankful for Ronald McDonald room. So anybody out there, put your change in the Ronald McDonald thing at McDonald's, because they help parents out who are at the hospital. It's an amazing thing to have a safe, quiet room to go to while you're going through whatever medical thing your child's in. So 1 a.m., I get a phone call. We need you to come back. So I crossed from one end of the hospital to the other. And basically she was coding out right then. I'd left and her mom had stepped out of the room. So we think she waited till we were both out. I got back. They're doing compressions, and they called it. So come on, brain. The infection turned to sepsis, shut her body down, couldn't fight it, and that got her. Day one of the second round, they said, okay, the typical plan for this as far as treatment is she's going to end up needing a bone marrow transplant. We got to get so many sessions of chemo out of the way so we can kill the cancer. Then we're going to do a thing where we kill the bone marrow. And then if we have a match, they're going to interject that match's bone marrow back into her. I got tested, mom got tested, brother got tested. We're half matches. It's not a simple match thing like having A positive blood, B positive blood. It's a long, stretchy genome DNA thing. It took 3 weeks before we got the results back. While we were there dealing with that infection, 3 weeks after we got our first test, they said, hey, you're only partial matches. They checked the national database. She wasn't a match for anybody there. So we started on Facebook. I need everybody to go help us by going to bethematch.org, and they're going to send you a kit in the mail. It's got a swab. Do the swab, put it back in the mail. Now you're on the National Registry for Bone Marrow. One day you can get a phone call, says you match, you can save a life. So she passed away before we got that. We kept registering people, and her bestie started a foundation for us because her mom and I were just fried. We couldn't do that at the time. So we had a fun fair. We registered people for that. We did education stuff. We raised money. They still take gifts to the children's hospital that she stayed at. I was an Uber driver for a period after she died, and I had her picture with her shaved head, or not shaved / it had fallen out. And it said, please ask. So every day, I don't know how many passengers said, well, what's the story there? So I told them the story. I said, I need a favor now that you heard my story. I need you to go to that website and register. And I got all kinds of people said, no problem. 3 kids in her personal circle got phone calls, said, come for additional tests. 2 kids got to be donors. So my sliver of sanity that helped me for a lot of this is that we changed 2 families so they didn't have to go through it. We have gone through losing a child. So that is Caitlin and a bit of my grief process. Now, prior to losing her, I was bouncing between selling cars and driving for Uber. I sold cars on and off for 10 years. So I was a much more clean cut, not this long hair, wearing a tie kind of guy. And then after she passed, I knew, because just before she passed, she had graduated. My son was going to graduate that year. She was doing college. He was going to graduate from high school. And I was going to basically kind of be an empty nest kind of guy. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I want to travel. And I didn't formulate anything. And then she died. And then shock set in. And then as I was coming out of the fog, I'm like, all right, I am going to live life for her. So I'm going to travel. And then I met my future wife, and she's like, that is a great idea. Let's go do it together. So 2 of us are insane. And then that led us to getting that bus and starting this whole thing. So that's kind of the somewhat me ahead of that and going into the grief, losing my kiddo.
No, I definitely, wow, man, that is a wild journey, right? And when you were talking about the coding, it took me back. I was thinking, I was like, man, I can relate to that so much. From when my son passed away, he coded out and everything else, and it was like something out of the movies. And when I say that, it's like, it's not even, it doesn't even come close to explaining what it looks like, right? Because when you're the person sitting there watching it, it is the most confusing yet scariest thing that you can ever feel, right?
Because you don't know your loved one. It's not watching it on TV in the movies. This is your loved one there getting that compression, and it's starting to sink in. Oh no! Oh fuck! No! No! Please no! And then they saw it coming, I guess. So they brought in the priest. And I was already not a church-going guy, and I was ready to go over and toss the dude. So I still haven't reconciled with God on that. I focus on the universe when I look at stuff. I'm not ready to have that conversation with God, but
Yeah.
you got that. And then I'm just watching my kiddo. And I don't speak about it frequently, but that week, turning septic, she gained 50 pounds. She started bloating. So the image, how a dead animal on the side of the road starts to bloat?
Mm-hmm.
That's what started happening to her, and her eyes started pushing out. And I've done a fairly good job of compartmentalizing that. But watching that over a week, it was, come on, I need these antibiotics to work, kiddo. Come on, fight with it. Get those antibiotics to work. And then I don't know. I don't know if the doctors were telling us how serious it was and I wasn't hearing, or it's just because I'm the super optimistic guy most of the time. I'm like, all right, no problem. These antibiotics are going to work, because my train of thought was, okay, after this weekend is over, we're going to focus on this bone marrow thing. We're gonna go find tens of thousands of people that go sign up. And they're like, and I do remember the next to last day. Okay, well, let's get through this first, because she's in a serious condition. And it didn't really click till after that's what they were meaning. So I don't know, blinders, whatever, but I was not registering that, it'd been one thing if, okay, we're going through cancer treatment and it's failing, and we're getting all these different things that say, all right, it's not working. But this was just boom, switched gears and it was over. We didn't get this, we didn't watch treatment fail. She got an infection and then just changed it all.
Yeah. And see, that right there, where you said that right there, again, I can relate to that so much. I had a couple of days, you had a week, and it was watching it, right? It's like, whoa. And I was in the same situation, or something similar, but mine was a matter of minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like when my son passed away, the doctor came out, and before he goes, hey, we're gonna do a simple procedure, right? We're gonna give him super antibiotic. We're gonna do a blood transfer. When he wakes up in the morning, he's gonna be perfectly fine. So when they gave him the antibiotic, he comes out, it keeps us updated. Hey, he's doing fine. Vitals are good. He's just, we're about to start a blood transfusion. And just like that, all hell breaks loose. Right. And just like you, like when all hell's breaking loose, I'm watching this cold blue. I'm watching people run in, and I'm like, I'm looking at his mom. I'm like, what did they mean cold blue? What? And she's looking at me like, oh no. I was like, no. Oh no. What is going on?
Yeah.
So I'm watching the chaos in the room, because they got the doors right here, and they got a window over off on the side. And I'm watching. I'm like, and I'm seeing them handing stuff back, and and then a doctor calls out and he goes, hey, whoever don't belong in the room, please leave. And on the way out, go get his parents. We're losing him. And this is where that similarity comes, right? Not just with the cold blue, he coded out. I walk in and they're doing chest compressions on him. And his death was ruled unknown. Now, as he's trying to walk away, the lady bereavement counselor comes out, and first thing that she does is grabs my hand. And I turn around and I look at her. And man, I'm telling you, if it had been a dude, I probably would have punched him out. Like, don't grab me, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't. I snatched away from her, and I went and laid in bed, because the shock of it was, I was like, he's gonna get up, right? You know what I'm saying? Like this just did not happen, right? I know he's gonna get up, right? Like, he's a tough kid. I know he's gonna get up. And I laid in bed with him for 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. And he started getting cold, and his lips started turning blue. So these are the images. And, like listening to you, I was thinking to myself, those images don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
They don't go anywhere. They're part of our everyday life now, right? Um, and I wish I could tell parents that um, it does it, that it gets easier. And everybody's going to be different.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be different, right? And as a parent, I can say that over a period of time, you just learn how to maneuver with your grief,
Mm-hmm.
and you learn how to adjust your life accordingly in those moments, so to speak, right?
Right.
Because life does change. It definitely changes. We're not the, Bill's not the same person that he was in the beginning, during or after, right? You change as your grief needs.
So I always say it's like a Marvel movie or a science
Mm,
fiction movie. You get put in a new universe, and in the movie, you're trying to find a way back to the universe, and there's always in the movie the way back. No, we're in a new universe, and that door is sealed. Now we
mhm.
have to learn to navigate the universe without that person, and our brain has to adjust. So a lot of it is wiring.
Mhm.
Whatever the age of the person is, whether it's a spouse, child, there's so many years of, all right, they're there for dinner every night. So you come home, you expect to see them again, and your brain is wired to see that again. So a
Right,
lot of
right.
it is your brain has to rewire. That is not the expected thing anymore, you know? But yeah, it is a totally new universe, and you have to navigate the new feelings, the lack of
Mm,
that person in your life.
yeah,
And a lot of us now, not only did we lose our daughter, we lost other people because they don't know what to say to us.
right.
They don't want to deal with us. Because as a culture worldwide, as far as I know, we're horrible with grief. We don't have a process for grief that is helpful. I mean, 100% of us go through grief. In school, they teach us about taxes, how to fill out a job application, put on a tie, geometry, algebra. But the one thing that every single one of us is going to do, nobody gets any training. I talk to pastors, social workers, even full on therapists, and ask them, how much training do you have in grief? That much, if any. So there's nothing out there for the most part to help us navigate through that.
That's
And
very true.
I'm going to say, go ahead.
I was going to say whenever you get done, I got a statement up here, pretty much a question from Lincoln Smith. So I'm gonna put that up there after you get done.
Okay. So that book I discovered is called the Grief Recovery Method. And there's an institute for creating specialists in grief for this. It was started by a guy 40 something years ago, guy that lost a child, went through a divorce, started noticing he was dealing with life with alcohol, and
Mm,
he was in AA. So he looked at steps, actions he needed to take. What did I wish I had been told about grief? And put it to a book. And his goal when he first started was he tried to teach this to funeral home directors so they could be helpful to other people. And then other people who had lost a child or a spouse or whatever started noticing he was doing better. How are you doing better, man? And he started telling them. And it led to this 40 something year program of action steps towards moving from grief to grief recovery.
Mhm.
and it's an amazing process. And what we do, first thing is we talk about the things that we learned about grief. Society told us about grief. The first one, time heals everything. Well, you and I know that ain't the case. We ain't healed. If
Right.
time healed everything, when I got that flat tire last week, I just wait and it'd fix itself, right? Nope.
Right.
There's steps, action, things that have to be done to get through stuff.
Mhm.
Um, you know, we teach kids at a young age that sad is bad. Little Susie comes home. She's 7 years old. She had a bad day in the playground. The girls were picking on her. She goes home to mom, starts telling mom the story. Oh, it's okay, honey. Here, have some cookies and some milk. What did she do? She did two things. She taught her deal with your emotions by eating, and two, can't trust
Mhm.
mom with my feelings because that's what she's going to do to me. She's not going to really listen to my feelings. So
Right.
that's almost a universal thing. We don't like people being sad. We don't like watching people go through grief. There was a time when it made sense for us to be strong and shut the hell up. But that's back when we were in tribes and we had to focus on hunting, gathering, and fighting off that other tribe. In
Right.
today's society, that is not helpful to us because it turns we are a teapot. Somebody put a cork in the top and the flames turned up. What happens? That boils and boils and boils. So we got to find an outlet.
Mhm.
And typically, the outlet is somebody starts finding a bottle, drugs, porn, shopping therapy, or they stay busy. They are so deep in busyness that they are not going to deal with anything. So that's how we deal
Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah.
somewhere there was a question you said.
Yeah. Lincoln Smith have put this up here, so I'm gonna put it up here. And Lincoln, correct me if this is what you're trying to say. But he put up there. Um, is he wrong for pretending that they have passed? Which I think he meant to say that they haven't passed, so he can make it through the day. And
Okay.
and I see that, and I think to myself, like, I think we all do that, right? We pretend that our loved ones haven't passed so we can make it through, right? Like, I was reading an article one time, um, and I had this guy on my show a couple years ago, and he said that he used to send his son text messages, long after he had
Right.
passed away, just send him text messages. And one day, someone messaged him back. And so they never said who they were, right?
Right.
And never took away from the man's kid from what he was doing. And the guy pretended to be his son, like answering to him in a sense
Oh,
of, hey, dad, how you doing? And this, that, and other. So
oh,
the guy finally,
that
because
could
when
go
you're
two
going
ways.
through that, right? When you're going through the grift brain, you deep down inside, you don't want to face the reality. I know I didn't for the longest time,
Right.
and it took me a long time to admit that. But I didn't want to face the reality that, that my son had passed away.
Right.
I really
There's
didn't. I wanted someone to call me and say, "Hey, Tony, can you come pick Jacob from school?" Right? I
yeah,
waited for that for 2 years, man. two
yeah.
years, and here this guy is. He's sending these text messages, and then finally, he goes. He did that for probably about 6 months, and finally he realized that it wasn't his son. It was someone else, and so he messaged the guy and said, "Hey, do you have a moment to where I can call you?" And they linked up and they've been friends ever since
Oh
then.
wow.
So
Well, that's cool.
he did ask the guy, "Why didn't you just tell me?" He goes, "Because you were hurting, and who am I to add to your hurt? And if I could do something make you feel better,
Yeah.
then yeah, I would rather do that."
Yeah,
And
there's those angels out there that help with that. So, if Lincoln, if
right,
you're still
right.
here, my question at this point is, how far into the journey are you? You know, is this very fresh for you? Are you a year into it, 2 years? Where are you at with it? Because there's a point where you just you have to accept it for the most part. You may compartmentalize it. For the most part, it's reality. But I had a letter from federal student loans because I signed for her student loan, and to cancel it, all we had to do is go get the death certificate. I'm not doing that. That would seal the deal for me.
Right.
That unalterably, I have that death certificate. It's in my hands. It's in writing. So I still haven't done that. I've never gotten another letter, but that sat on my refrigerator with the magnet on it for a long, long time. And I'm like, nope, that makes it real. So I'm not going to deal with that. So, yeah, a lot for a while, especially in the beginning, you have to make the brain work. You do pretend. In the beginning, we get emotional Novocaine injected to our brain because the brain knows this is so traumatic, we cannot deal with it. So therefore, it floods us. So that fog, that numb, that's the emotional Novocaine hitting us. And it takes a long time for that to process out of us. It keeps us sort of safe so we can start adjusting to that, because it is, you know, there's losing the parents, but we expect that for the most part. You know, if parents die young, I guess it's a little harsher, but I can see my mom is 86, dad is 83. I know that's coming. So I'm preparing for it. You know, that is the natural course of history. Mom and dad will die before me in the most cases. But that child,
Right.
There's no name for it. You're not a widower. There's no name for somebody who has lost a child. Widow, widower.
Yeah.
You know, there's no name for it because it's so universally wrong and incomprehensible. We haven't given a name. Now, I have a friend, it's in another group. He's trying to call us peregrines, and I forget the analogy he uses, but basically they're like the fastest birds on the earth, and they make changes and whatever. But he's trying to see if we can use that as a name for those of us who had lost a child, and he's got the Peregrine Club. But yeah, so Lincoln, hopefully you'll come back with where you're at. But there's big differences between somebody in that 6 months, that first year. Everybody talks about that first year. Sometimes that second year is worse. It's because it's really hard, because now you've passed all the dates. You have that first anniversary of the death. You know, the first Christmas, the first Thanksgiving, the first birthday, whatever. And then you hit that date of the death of the anniversary death. And then it solidifies things more. So that second year is like, oh, this is real. We're going to keep celebrating, or not necessarily saying, we're going to keep suffering through these other dates without them here. So, and then as it goes on, we adjust. But, you know, like I said, there's action steps you can take to move out of pain and to be in a space where because some people they can't have joy, love again, because they're so in that. But there are things you can do to move and take out most of the negative aspects. So I'm going to kind of dip into the grief recovery process. So first we work on the things that society taught us that are wrong. 99.9% of them are wrong. The things that, like I said, Time heals everything. Deal with it yourself. All that's wrong. Next step is the behaviors we've been using to cope with it. It's called a STIRB, short-term emotional relieving behavior. That's using the bottle, eating, sex, shopping, whatever. I'm an emotional eater. I'm happy. Let's eat. I'm sad. Let's eat. I'm bored. Let's eat. I know my behavior for dealing with my emotions. Some people don't realize it. So when we go over that in two things. We either learned, mom and dad taught this to me, or we have a really hard other aha moment. Oh shit, I've been teaching this to my kids, and we're going to create kids with the same problems as far as emotions and how they're going to deal with them. So then we talk about the emotions. Then we go into, all right, I want to create a timeline for you from the day you're born till today, your pieces of grief. Now let's define what grief is. First off, grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss. Grief is also the feelings. Let me pull up so I don't butcher it. Oh, of course not. I clicked it up. But the feelings we have when life in our normal pattern has changed. So we all think of loss of a spouse, a child, a loved one, our dog is grief. But there's also a divorce. There's also loss of a job, loss of our health. There's 40 different things that affect our life that change how we feel that are all really grief. So there's all of these things that we have that are grief. So we talk about all the things in your life that are grief. And usually when we do this timeline, we see a pattern of a particular person. Now, when I went through this grief training, my daughter had just passed. So logically, many people think going in, I'm going to deal with this this current loss. When we go back and look at the big view, there's somebody in our past that has really done a number on us that we need to deal with first, because that will not let us go forward with dealing with anybody else. So we'll say somebody's got a mom, whether it's a good relationship with mom, a bad relationship with mom, whatever. We now pluck mom out and individualize the things that happen with mom, all the things with mom, good, bad to ugly. And we write those out. And typically that's going to be, there's a moment in life where I got to forgive mom for what she did, or I got to apologize to mom for what I did, or there's a significant emotional statement to an event that happened. So now we're bringing back all these memories that we buried for a while, and we're putting them on paper. Well, as I have you put that on paper, first, that's an emotional thing, writing it down, okay? Because nobody sits and deals with their emotions. So this is the first time, basically, I'm putting a gun to your head and making you deal with your emotions to get to the next point. And then based on that timeline and those things, we're going to write a letter to mom. Mom's dead, so we can't read it to her. So if we're doing it as a group, you're going to do it with your partner, or if I'm doing it one-on-one, you're going to read this to me, but you're going to read it as if you're talking to mom. And it's cathartic. Reading, saying it so somebody hears it, because a lot of these things you wanted to say. There's a lot of woulda, shoulda, couldas in life that we had with that person we lost, and we never got to say it. So by saying it to somebody hearing, somebody acknowledging those words, it takes them out of our system. And that comes off your shoulders. I can't. It's literally one of those, like in a movie, when you see the release in that deep breath and they've expelled the tears, and I've dealt with this. So that's a toolkit. Now you can go back, and any other person, that's been in your life, you can do the same thing or future thing. So typical therapy, what I say is most cases a wet band-aid. You go, you talk about your week, they give a band-aid, and they say, come back next week, come back next month. This process, the grief recovery method, is surgery. We do an exam, we find out what happened, what you did before, then we look at the actual fragments that are in there. It's basically like you were shot and the bullet fragmented. And now we're going to work on pulling out those fragments. And we're going to show you how to stitch it up. And guess what? I've taught you how to do it again if you get shot again. Because the reality is we're all going to continue to have grief in our life. So that's kind of the short version of grief recovery. But
so I like that because being a men's grief coach, I teach something very similar to that, right? Because of the process I went through. And I didn't find the grief recovery method till I was already, let's see, my son is this year be 9 years. I think I was already maybe 3-4 years into it. And I was already using some of those and not even knowing it, right? You know what I'm saying? Because instinctively, at least for some people, instinctively, we know how to listen to what our bodies is telling us to do. Because I'm also a believer in, when you're going through things, inside of your DNA is embedded the tools that you need in order to process that pain, that grief, as long as you're willing to follow and do what's right by you, but also finding ways of honoring your loved ones by not just living your life, but doing things that you used to do with them. Right. And I found that to be a useful tool. A lot of things, still go to Chuck E. Cheese, Applebee's, still go fishing, still climb trees, still go to the park and swing on the swings, still harassing the kids. It took me a long time to get there as well, going and being around my friends with their children because it was a reality. And it was a selfish reality in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is that, when my son passed away, I kind of ventured off and I stayed away from a lot of people and that had kids, and then something just not probably within the last year or so, it dawned on me. Those kids are struggling too, right? Because a lot of my friends' kids, they still reach out to me. They were reaching out to me, Tony, how you doing, and things like that. And grief is such a selfish thing that I didn't even think about that, right? I didn't I didn't think about the relationship that my son had with these kids. I
Yeah.
didn't think about the relationship that their parents have with my son. I didn't think about the school and his friends in school or rock climbing or hip hop class. I didn't think about any of that stuff. But yet I'm getting letters. Hey, how you doing? Um, and then, what was the eye-opening moment? I was doing personal training, and my client was friends with one of my sons. I like to say his it would have been his future girlfriend or wife, right?
Uh-huh.
And she was like, "Hey, I hope you don't mind, but I'm friends with them and their daughter and your son. They used to go to school together." And when she told me who the little girl was, I was like, "Oh man!" Then it dawned on me. They were joined at the hip at the age of 6 through 8, right? They were
Yeah.
always in school, just with each other all the time. And so I finally met with their parents. This little girl, because you think to yourself, kids forget, right?
Mhm.
They're gonna forget. And when I finally broke down, this little girl saw me and she runs up, she gives me the biggest hug, the biggest hug that you can ever imagine. Her parents are sitting off watching, and they just break down crying. And I hug her back and I pick her up. I said, little one, how you doing? And she put her head on my shoulder. She goes, I miss him so much. And she just began to bawl. And so I'm looking at her parents just to make sure that they're okay with me holding their little girl, because I'm not trying to offend no one. And her parents over there just bawling. And I told her, I said, you can always pick up the phone and call me anytime that you want. She goes, really? She got a big old smile on her face. And I gave her my phone number and I told her, I said, go over there and give this to your parents and let them know, that it's okay if you can give me a call if you want to. If you want to talk or anything like that, you can give me a call. And the parents walked over there to me and they said, she hasn't stopped crying in 3 years since he passed away. Now that was one personal training. Now I still talk to the little one, right? She's getting she's gotten a little bit taller. She's in her teenage years, but sometimes I forget, right? And she reminds me, hey, don't forget, your son wasn't like this. And so still now as a teenager, and they were around each other when they were 6, 7 years old, I think we often forget or get wrapped into our own selfish grief, and I don't say that to take away or in a derogatory term, but it's the truth, right? Grief is selfish, and a lot of tools that we develop, I think sometimes we forget where people are. With LC Lincoln, I've known Lincoln for quite some time. So if he pops back up here, and I'm pretty sure he's still listening, things like that, he's probably processing what you just said, because he and I talk all the time. I've had him on the show a couple of times. A great dude, but Lincoln is one of those guys, and when I tell you this number, it's going to blow your mind. He's lost over 300 people in his life. What just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, he lost his cousin to police violence. So I'm talking about family members, friends, people that are close to him. Since I've known him, when I first met him a few years ago, up until now, he lost over 240 people.
Wow,
just like that.
So I'm guessing he's a deeply connected community kind of person.
Yeah, and he's a civil activist now, right? So he's out there. He's out there doing good work in the community. He hasn't, and he's out there helping the homeless people. He's bringing awareness to the fentanyl epidemic out there. So big shout out to Lincoln over there doing his thing, and he is a strong-willed guy. So when he put that comment up there, I can definitely understand, because we talked about it a couple of times, and I told him it's okay to pretend that they're still here. And, eventually we do have to come to a place of acknowledgement, and everybody's different. Not everybody's going to be fast-tracked. Sometimes people need to take some necessary steps. And like you said, with the grief recovery method, when I finally read that book, I was like, man, I didn't know I was doing this, right? Because it was a backwards journey in life where I had to address where did it all start, right? And that's when the accountability, the grace, the patience, the forgiveness, all of those things came into play. And I became the person that I need when I was 6. And then I realized the different versions of myself throughout life that I had to become in order to survive in this world. From the inmate to the homeless guy, to the gangbanger, to the drug dealer, all of those different things. I had to go through a process, and it was painful. It was so painful, because there was a lot of things, like you said, Bill, that the brain will hide from you, because the brain don't want you to hurt. So it was sometimes mask things and replace them with false memories, which I find, right? And so when we in that brain fog, which I realized, like you said, it's like Novocaine, right? But but also I want to add to that. Not only is it like Novocaine, but I think the brain is rewiring itself.
Yeah. It's got to
It's
start that process of how do I
right,
cope with this? Because
right.
there's
And so,
pain,
mm,
and then there's wait, what is all this? Because there's a hole out here. There's somebody supposed to be
mhm,
here every day and see this. So that I'm dealing with the pain and I'm figuring out how to make new synapses or whatever it is that don't look for that person every day. So
right.
that brain has to undo itself and redo itself. But tools, that's the key to
Mm,
this. We give people a hammer, a screwdriver, and a bucket of paint for grief and say, paint this
mm,
room. You can't paint the room with that. We give people the wrong tools to deal with grief. That's the
yes,
big piece.
yes.
So if we give everybody, I say, you know, there's a second component to this that we teach. It's called When Children Grieve. It's a series, a book in a series that we teach parents, school teachers, coaches, whoever who deal with kids, and they give them tools, language to give to those children to deal with grief. So if you start everybody way back early, they won't develop all these hangups with emotions and grief. But it's the
Right.
tools, having the wrong information. I mean, there's lots of cases of things just beyond your visual area, like homelessness, certain individuals. There's tools out there, but if you don't know they exist, there's resources out there. If you don't know they exist, you can't fix your problem. If you don't know
Mm,
where to go for rent assistance, you don't know how to apply for free college aid, or where the food bank is, or where the soup kitchen is, you can't go help yourself to these things. So there's education that has to be done on all kinds of different things in life. But if you're not given the right tools, you can't get out of the mess. You're in it, and
right.
you got these broken tools, wrong tools that you're trying to survive with, and they just don't help.
That's very true. That's those are facts right there, because I have seen, and I also have seen, I have seen that happen where people do get the wrong tools. But I think a lot of that is that they get connected with the wrong people.
Right.
And I'm not taking anything away from anyone. What I find in a lot of cases when it comes down to grief work, you got counselors and therapists that don't necessarily have the tools for the
Very much so.
individual that they're working with. And instead of letting them go or connecting them with the right people that they can actually, benefit from, they rather hold on to them
Yeah.
for their own. And again, when I say this, is these are just things that I see and have seen. They hold on to them for the monetary gain instead of
Yeah.
admitting that they're not the right fit for this individual, and
Right.
they end
Yeah.
up
A
doing a
lot
lot
of it
more damage.
is you have to be the right fit for the therapist, but um, yeah, some of it's personality. I mean, you've got to find that right person for you.
Right, right.
You've got to be, as the patient, be in the right mindset for it, to be receptive to it. But if you go into it in something is off about your perception of that therapist, just it screws up the whole thing. That's a problem. But
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is there's not a lot of therapists that are focused on grief that have that right tool set. So they'll just keep throwing in stuff out there. Let's see if it sticks,
Yeah.
because that's all the tools they have in their box. come on, we'll figure out, we'll make this work with these tools. I know we will. Well, no. And we got to get more people the right tools. More guys. Let's kind of flip into what you focus on, and I do kind of as well. My target market is guys, because all the things we get taught about not dealing with emotions. We're not allowed to cry. We're not allowed to say anything. We got to be strong for everybody. The movies we see, it's not allowed. Dad will tell you, if you're going to cry, go to your room. My grandmother died in front of me when I was 7 years old. We got dropped off for the night. Mom and Dad were going to a wedding. So my brother was 4, I was 7. Grandma, we came inside from playing. Grandma's on the floor. She's croaking, and she's trying to talk to me. Marge Simpson's sisters? You watch The Simpsons?
Yeah,
they talk like this. My grandma talked like that because she was a smoker. Billy, I need you to call the Port Authority. As she's on the floor. I'm 7. It's 1976. There's no 911 at the time. I go to the phone book, and I don't even know how to spell Port Authority. Grandma, I don't know what to do. So I run down to Jimmy's house, 2 houses over. Hoping Jimmy's mom comes to the door. She comes to the door, and Jimmy can't play. We're having dinner. Closes the door. And but in being a little compliant 7-year-old, I go back, and Grandma's done. Now you're going, what, why was she asking for the Port Authority, man? So we live in a town that is on Lake Michigan. So we have a lot of boats. I have an uncle had a boat. He was down there that weekend. So we're surmising after the fact that she wanted me to reach out to the Port Authority. They would contact him. He'd come back and save her. That didn't happen. So here I am, 7. Grandma's dead in front of me. We spent the night with Grandma 10 feet away. We went on the couch. We wrapped up in the Afghan blankets that she had knitted herself and fell asleep. Next morning, my mom comes. She calls first, and she's like, something's not right. Comes. Grandma's there. She calls the coroner. She takes us to the front of the house. Don't cry. Don't look. Okay. They wheel her out. Over the next several hours, family comes. Uncles, cousins. We're outside, and uncles and cousins are crying. I'm like, but why? Mom said we don't cry. So that was first lesson in don't cry. Don't deal with emotions. 3 years later, my 3rd grade teacher dies while we're on Christmas break. We come back to have an assembly out in the gym, and they explain what's going on. And there was no kind of real grief kind of thing back in 1979. Right. There was nothing going on back then. Just the idea that somebody would go to therapy for anything was like, oh no, I don't know if that's a good thing. There's a stigma. There still is a lot of stigma for some people, but everybody's crying in the gym. I'm not crying because Mom told me we don't cry for these things. So that stuck with me till just about 40, when I finally saw somebody to help get Grandma out of my head. I finally dealt with that all along. So I was stunted emotionally with stuff because at 7, Mom said, don't cry. So that's how deep it is. There, almost everybody, if they look hard, they'll find an incident. I see a friend of mine over there, Chris Glantz. He's listening in on that. Hi, Chris. But yeah, we're taught this. We have to unteach it. We have to get the future, the tools, while they're young, so they don't have to grapple with all this the way we do.
Right.
So,
right.
Convincing people to go deal with your emotions, that's tough. I offer I'm at that homeless shelter where, all right, we'll just say 100% of it. If I sit everybody down, they've all got something in their background with a big grief. But I'm sitting ones down where I know they had kid died, mom died, dad died real young, and that changes the trajectory of life. And I'm like, look, here's what I do. I lost a child. I get it. Grandma died in front of me. I'm not one of these ivory tower therapists who is 23 and never experienced anything in their life. I'm here on the streets with you, man. Come on, let's talk about this. Let's just get this out. And
Right.
it is very hard to get people to say, I'm ready to deal with that. It is
I like that.
beat my head against the wall. It really is.
Yeah. I definitely like that. But I also like the fact where you said we have to start teaching them young. Um, because a lot of things have changed now. We're in 2024. I think COVID actually opened up the doors from things that we have been trying to tell people and brought it to the forefront, which allows us now to go, hey, let us do what we're called to do, right? But also it brought a reality for the children, mental health, addictions, their lifestyles, of being in abusive homes and things like that can now be addressed. And I look at today's uh, um, reality. We have a lot more opportunity to implement things in the school systems.
Yeah.
Providing spaces for the children to be able to come and process what's going on, because it seems, I was telling somebody this, and it sounds funny, but it's the reality of it. It feels like we're in a game of Jumanji and we just don't know what's going to happen next, right?
Yeah. After 2020 and COVID, now that it's definitely got that feel to it.
Right.
All right,
It's like whoever got the dice, stop rolling them, please stop.
right,
Or
right.
I often use this analogy too. You got some kid out there with some magical crayons just creating stuff. I'm like, hey, take the crayons away. Let's stop. Let us get
Yeah.
caught up a little bit first.
Yeah.
But I do believe that we're in an age now to where we can do so much more, and we need people like Bill. We need people, other people like ourselves that are willing and to be able to bring our different niches together
Yeah.
so we can do so much more, and not only just the schools, but in our communities, to provide those things, to go out there and be in the muck with these individuals, at least the ones who want the help, and for those who don't want the help, to at least make sure that they have the opportunity or the options available to them, because you never know where a person is or where they're going to be at from day to day, moment to moment. We just never know. But I think it's important that we do have things, actionable strategies in place, the people that can walk with them, that can make themselves available when they need, right? And the reason being, I was at an event not too long ago, at an event, and something was said that really just rubbed me the wrong way. Uh, Someone's phone was going off, and the person that they were calling was a mental health advocate. And this is what I mean, and this doesn't go for everyone, but this is just bringing reality that there are people like this out there. The individual said, I don't know why they're calling me. We've already given them the tools. Why don't they use them? So I stopped and I looked at her. I didn't say anything. I wanted to, right? And it dawned on me. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Because we got people out there that I think they get into this field for nefarious reasons, just to say that they have a title and not really walking with the individuals. And it makes the job just a little bit more challenging, not hard, but just a little bit more
Yeah.
challenging, because
Yeah.
they can tend to group us all together and have a bad taste in their mouth.
Right.
But I say that, with that um, comes a quote. Sometimes you have to maneuver through life and live life as if you're not afraid of being hurt. And that comes with therapy. That comes with finding the right sort of support, finding your tribe, right? It takes a little bit of time,
Yeah.
but I think with the right people walking along with you, we can definitely make a huge difference in this world. Yeah. Bill, um, first I want to say, man, thank you for having such an amazing conversation with me. Thank you for being on the show.
I'm honored to
How can
share it
people
with you,
find
man.
you? Yeah, man,
People
that was
find me.
a pleasure.
Okay.
We got a lot more to come. So you guys keep your eye out. Bill's gonna be. I'm gonna see if I can't talk him coming back up here and doing some more educational stuff and everything. And you guys will see a lot more of him as well. So, Bill, how can people find you?
Okay. So I got a website. It's real easy. thegrievingdad.com. On YouTube, The Grieving Dad. On Instagram, The Grieving Dad. If you put in Facebook it's The Grieving Dad, or just find me on Facebook as Bill Fennell. That I have wide open settings as far as what do you call that? Security and whatever. So anybody can reach me, even the crazy salespeople from China and India, whatever. But I got no filters on that. So anybody can reach out to me on those things. But yeah, if you like what I'm saying now, go watch a bit of my videos on YouTube and see if we really connect. We can have a consultation about if I'm a good fit for you and you're a good fit for me. Because I mean, sometimes it's got to go both ways,
Right.
to make it work. But even if it's not me, find somebody. Or if you like the concepts of the grief recovery method, Google the grief recovery method or the grief recovery institute. And there are other specialists out there because, it's a personality thing. Although you might think, oh, I ain't going to this long haired dude wearing rings. I need somebody else, or maybe I need a woman, whatever. They have thousands of people that are certified grief specialists, but find somebody to go to. Make that step. I don't care. I used to sell cars, and I used to say, I'm not going to get hurt if you tell me I'm not the right car. I'm not the right car guy for you. I'm not going to get mad at you if I'm not the right therapist. If we're not connecting, that's great because I'm not for everybody. You're not for everybody. Find the person who is that's going to help you, guide you through this journey. You need the guide through the journey that's been through this to help you. We kind of had this conversation there, and I've had it with others, that in every big story, there's the guy that needs to be the hero. In somewhere, an elderly person, not an elderly person, but an older guide comes along and gives them the pointer, the tool, the magic sword, whatever it is, to where they go. Even in biblical stories, you have that somebody comes to them. This is the path you need to take. It's time to. There's a Led Zeppelin song. There's two paths to go on. Either way, they'll lead there. But you want to take the easy path, or you want to continue down this one that's really hurting. And if you keep doing those same things all the time, ain't nothing going to change. You're not going to move into those spaces where you can find love, joy, happiness, opportunities again. If you keep doing the same thing, you've got to figure out how to get out of your grief. You have to go through the grief. Can't go over it, under it, around it. You got to go through it. So those are the places you can find me. I'm super excited to have been here today. And if we can connect again, Tony, man, I would love to do more of this with you. And I'm happy, if there's questions or whatever, I'll hammer out questions.
Of course. You already know. I told you this, man. You don't get rid of me that much, that fast, man. We got a lot more to do, and so, that's going to lead to a lot more deeper discussions. I got a lot of things coming up right now. So you guys are going to see a lot more, Bill. And, before I let you go, Bill, I always ask my guests this. If you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with today?
Ooh. So if you're not willing to go to a grief specialist, go get that book. you can kind of self-pace it, but just go address your grief and realize you're not the only one. That's the thing. There's plenty of us out here. Speak to somebody that's been in it. People are happy to share their experience, to give you the hand you need to help you up that ladder of grief. But just don't be afraid to reach out and deal with that grief, deal with the emotions. That's the key. You got to decide, today's the day I'm going to start dealing with it. No matter who you go to, start dealing with it. Don't just sit there and be the person consumed by grief. You're not, because this is going to be another quick. There's people that would rather stay there in their grief because they know what it is, because they're too afraid of that new step. I don't have that identity now as somebody who's lost a child or is in grief or whatever my thing. It's kind of like people in an abusive relationship. They stay there because they know they're demon. They're afraid of the other thing on the other side. You've got to not be afraid. Make the leap. Get help. That's
I love that, man. I couldn't have said it any more perfect. No, man, that's perfect, right? Because it reminds people that you can't do it by yourself. You have to have people that can walk with you, but have the right people that can walk with you. Now, for everyone that is tuned in, you guys go check out Bill. Go check out his social media. Go check out his website. Definitely go check out his YouTube channel. Show him some love over there as well. You guys are going to see a lot more of them. And as always, if you guys have tuned in, have rolled with us this whole entire time, do me a favor. If you have not already, this helps out the channel. Go over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Like these episodes and leave comments on them, please. And as always, if you guys know anyone that could benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this with them. And as always, thank you guys for supporting. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for allowing us to keep bringing these amazing conversations to you guys. I am Tony Lynch. This is going to conclude this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And please, 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 please keep your eye out on the other events that we have coming out. We have the Sibling-in-Law Summit coming up. We have the Global Grief Conference that's going to be coming up. We got the books and things. We have more events coming up. So we're going to keep you guys up to date on everything that's coming about. And we're going to keep bringing amazing guests to you guys as always. And until next episode, you guys keep your head up. We love you. And as always, thank you for everything that you allow us to keep doing. Till next episode. Peace.